My brother called to tell me I wasn't invited to his wedding. I was standing in my kitchen, reheating leftover pad thai at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. I remember that detail because I had just worked a 12-hour shift and I hadn't eaten since a granola bar at 2 in the afternoon. My feet were still sore from standing on a concrete floor all day. I was in my socks, I had already taken off my work shoes, and the microwave was humming and my phone lit up with my brother's name. I almost didn't answer. I almost let it go to voicemail. I don't know what my life would look like now if I had. My brother's name is Connor. He's 28, 3 years younger than me. Growing up, we were close the way kids are close when there aren't a lot of other options. The same house, the same dinner table, the same secondhand video game console we shared on weekends. When we were teenagers, I used to cover for him with our parents when he stayed out past curfew. I thought that's what older sisters did. I'm the one who got out first, not dramatically. I didn't run away or anything. I just went to college on a partial scholarship and a lot of loans, got a job in supply chain operations at a logistics company outside of Columbus, and built something that looked like a life. Small apartment, used car that worked most of the time, a 401k I was actually contributing to. Nothing flashy. Nothing that should have made me a target, but I think that's exactly what did. It started the way it always starts. Small. So small you don't even recognize it as a pattern until you're 3 years deep and you can't remember the last time you said no. The first time was my dad's truck. This was maybe 6 months after I started my job. The transmission had gone out and my dad needed it for work. He does landscaping, so no truck meant no income. My parents didn't have the savings. It was $2,200 to fix it. I had just gotten my first real paycheck with a raise, and my mom called me crying, and I said yes before she even finished the sentence. I told myself it was a one-time thing. I told myself they'd pay me back. They didn't, but I let it go. It was my dad's truck. It was his livelihood. I understood. 6 months after that, my brother needed first and last month's rent to move into an apartment with his girlfriend at the time. $1,800. He said he'd pay me back within 90 days. He had a job lined up. He was responsible. He just needed a bridge. The job fell through. The 90 days came and went. When I brought it up gently, very gently, I wasn't confrontational about it. He said he was working on it and changed the subject. My mom, when I mentioned it to her, told me not to pressure him because he was going through a hard time. I absorbed that. I told myself, family helps family. After that, it became a rhythm I didn't even consciously notice. My mom's car insurance lapsed and I covered 3 months to get it reinstated, $640. My dad had a medical bill for a follow-up after a minor procedure. Insurance only covered part of it, and I put $900 on my credit card. Connor needed a laptop for a new job. Connor's girlfriend, now fiancé, needed a plane ticket to visit her sick grandmother. Connor and his fiancé needed help with a security deposit on a nicer apartment. I want to be clear about something, because I've thought about this a lot since everything fell apart. Helping with the medical bill made sense. That was real. That was the kind of thing families do. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about genuine need and started being about convenience. About knowing I would say yes. About not even having to ask twice. I was the family's yes. I didn't fully understand that until the fall. I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a highlighter and went through 18 months of my bank statements. I had been putting it off for a while. There was always a reason not to look too closely, but I was trying to figure out why, despite 2 raises and a promotion, I was still living paycheck to paycheck. I could not explain where my money was going, so I made myself look. I went line by line. I highlighted every transfer, every Venmo, every time I had covered a bill or fronted cash for my family. Some of them I had forgotten about entirely. The laptop, the plane ticket, the time Connor asked me for $300 because his car got towed and he needed it back before his shift, and I sent it in 10 minutes without a second thought. When I added it all up, I had to put the pen down. In 18 months, I had given or lent, but let's be honest, given $14,340 to my family. That wasn't including the truck repair 2 years before that. That was just 18 months. I sat with that number for a long time. I felt something shift behind my sternum, like something that had been held together with pressure finally giving way. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter than that, something closer to grief. I had student loans. I had credit card debt I'd accumulated partly because I kept saying yes to everyone else. I had a savings account that should have had 6 months of emergency funds in it, but had less than $800. I was 31 years old and I was financially treading water while the people I kept rescuing were making plans. And I don't just mean plans in the abstract. Connor and his girlfriend Amber had announced their engagement 4 months earlier. The wedding was set for the following October, 14 months away. It was going to be a real wedding. Not a courthouse thing, not a backyard thing. A venue, a caterer, a DJ, a florist. Amber had been showing my mom inspiration boards for months. I knew where this was going before anyone said a word to me. My mom called first. She was excited, genuinely excited, and I don't think she had any idea what she was walking into. She said that the venue required a deposit to hold the date, $3,500, and that Connor and Amber were a little short, and since I was the maid of honor, I stopped her there. I haven't been asked to be maid of honor yet. Well, Connor's going to ask you. You know that. I told her I'd think about it. She told me the deposit deadline was in 2 weeks. I didn't say yes that night. That was new for me. I told my boyfriend about it. His name is Miles. We'd been together about 2 years at that point. And he was quiet for a moment, and then he asked me something I hadn't been asked before. He said, "What do you actually want to do?" Not what I thought I should do. Not what would keep the peace. What did I want? I didn't have an answer right away. That probably tells you something. I thought about it for 4 days. I thought about the $14,340. I thought about the $1,800 Connor still hadn't paid back from 3 years ago. I thought about how I had never once received a Venmo request from my family. I was always the one sending. I thought about how when I mentioned money, even obliquely, my mom would redirect the conversation to what Connor was dealing with, what my dad was going through, what was hard for other people, never what was hard for Mother. I thought, if I put in $3,500 for this deposit, what happens next? The catering, the flowers, the rehearsal dinner, the bachelorette weekend. It wouldn't stop at the deposit, it never stopped. I called Connor directly. I told him I loved him and I wanted to be there for his wedding, but I wasn't in a position to contribute to the deposit right now. I said it calmly. I said I was happy to be maid of honor and to support them in ways that didn't involve large sums of money. There was a long pause. Then he said, "I thought you were doing well." I said, "I'm working on it." He said Amber would be disappointed. He said the date would be lost if they couldn't pull the deposit together. He said he'd figured I would help because I always had before. That sentence sat with me for days. I figured you would help because you always had before. That was the whole thing right there, wasn't it? My mom called the next day, then my dad. They weren't angry yet. They were in persuasion mode, which is its own kind of pressure. My mom told me I was going to regret not stepping up for Connor's big day. My dad said families pull together. Neither of them mentioned the $14,340. Neither of them mentioned the $1,100 that was still outstanding. It was as if all of that simply didn't exist, as if the ledger only ran in one direction. I told them I was sorry I couldn't help this time. I held the line. They found the deposit money somewhere else. I found out later it was a cash advance on the credit card with a brutal interest rate, but that was their choice to make. The wedding planning moved forward. And for a while, things were just awkward, strained. My mom's texts got shorter. Connor and I went from talking a couple times a week to barely once a month. I told myself this was temporary, that it would smooth over. Then came Thanksgiving. We always did Thanksgiving at my parents' house. I drove the 2 hours home with Miles, brought a pie, the usual. It was the first time I'd seen Connor and Amber since our phone call. Amber was cold to me in the way that's technically polite but unmistakably deliberate. Answered my questions in monosyllables, turned her body away when I came into the room. Connor mostly avoided eye contact. I tried to keep things normal. I helped in the kitchen. I asked my dad about work. I played with my nephew, my older cousin's kid who always ends up at these things. I did everything I was supposed to do. Dinner was almost over when Amber said, loudly enough for the table to hear, that it was too bad some people couldn't be supportive of family when it actually mattered. The table went quiet. I looked at my mom. My mom looked at her plate. I said, Amber, if you want to have a conversation about this, I'm happy to, but not here. She said she didn't see why not here. She said she just thought it was interesting how I could claim to care about Connor but wouldn't help with the most important day of his life. She said some people were more focused on themselves than on their family. Connor said nothing. My dad cleared his throat and said something about pie. My mom got up to refill drinks. Miles put his hand on my knee under the table. I took a breath. I didn't cry, which felt like a victory. I got through dinner, we drove home. I was quiet the whole 2 hours and Miles didn't push me to talk, which was exactly right. That night I made a decision, not an impulsive one. I sat with it for 2 weeks before I acted on it. I went back through everything. The bank statements, the Venmos, the texts where I'd said, of course, and happy to help, and don't worry about it. I wrote down every amount I could document. I thought about what I wanted to say and whether there was any version of saying it that would be heard. I didn't think there was, but I said it anyway. I wrote my parents a letter. Not an email, an actual letter, because I wanted it to feel considered, not reactive. I laid it out calmly. I told them how much I had contributed over the past few years and what I had given up to do it. I told them that I had never once been thanked without a follow-up ask. I told them that when Amber spoke to me the way she did at Thanksgiving and no one at that table said anything, I understood something about my position in this family that I hadn't fully admitted to myself before. I told them I loved them. I told them I wasn't going anywhere. But I told them things had to change, and until there was an actual conversation, not a persuasion call, an actual conversation, I would be taking a step back. My mom called the day the letter arrived. She was crying. She said I was being dramatic. She said I was punishing Connor for something that wasn't his fault. She said Miles had changed me. I listened. I told her I'd said what I needed to say in the letter and I wasn't going to go in circles. I told her I'd be available to talk when she was ready to actually talk. She hung up. My dad texted me 3 days later. He said I had broken my mother's heart. That was the entire message. Connor didn't reach out at all. I had been prepared for it to be hard. I had not been prepared for the silence from Connor to feel the way it did. He was my little brother. I had covered for him when he missed curfew. I had driven 4 hours round trip to help him move into his first apartment, the one I'd paid the deposit for. I had genuinely wanted good things for him, but wanting good things for someone doesn't mean accepting any version of yourself they need you to be. The next few months were uncomfortable in the way that doing a necessary thing is often uncomfortable. I put the money I would have been sending home into my savings account instead. I paid down $4,000 of credit card debt in 4 months, which I had never been able to do before because I was always floating someone else. I started sleeping better. That surprised me. I hadn't realized how much of my anxiety was financial, or how much of my financial anxiety was something I had been causing to myself by saying yes to everything. Miles and I started actually talking about our future. Not in the vague, we'll figure it out way we'd been doing, but concretely. What we wanted. Whether it was possible. For the first time in my adult life, it felt possible. My mom and I talked twice during those months. Surface level, careful. She didn't bring up the letter. I didn't push. I missed her, genuinely. I missed the version of my relationship with my family that had existed before I understood what that relationship had cost me. About 8 months after Thanksgiving, Amber called me. I almost didn't answer that either. She was not apologetic exactly, but she was different. Quieter. She said the wedding was 4 months away and that she had been thinking about what happened at Thanksgiving and she thought she had handled it wrong. She said she and Connor had been under a lot of stress and she had taken it out on me in a way she wasn't proud of. I sat with that for a beat. Then I said I appreciated her saying so. She asked if I would still be willing to be in the wedding. Not maid of honor. She'd already asked her best friend to do that. Just stand up with them. I asked her honestly, did she and Connor want me there, or was this about optics? There was a pause. Then she said, honestly, both. But I think also genuinely. I respected the honesty enough to say I'd think about it. I talked to Miles. I talked to my therapist, who I had started seeing around month 3 of all this. I thought about what it would mean to show up, and what it would mean not to. I decided I would go. Not for Connor, not for Amber, not to make my mom happy. I went because I didn't want the story of my life to be one where I let one bad chapter make me close the whole book. The wedding was fine. Beautiful, actually. They'd managed to pull it together. My mom hugged me longer than usual when I arrived. My dad shook Miles's hand. Connor and I had a brief, careful conversation at the reception, the kind that has, "This isn't over, but I'm not doing this tonight" underneath every sentence. It wasn't healed. But it wasn't gone. Afterward, driving home, Miles asked me how I felt. I thought about it for a while. We were on the highway, the dark, flat stretch of I-70 West, the kind of drive that makes you honest. I told him I felt okay. Not triumphant, not vindicated. Just okay. Like someone who had finally learned to read the weather correctly and had started carrying an umbrella. He asked if I regretted any of it. I thought about the $14,340. I thought about the 8 months of paying down debt. I thought about the night at Thanksgiving when no one at that table said a word. I said I wished it had gone differently. I think I'll always wish that. But no, I didn't regret it. He nodded and turned the radio on low, and we drove the rest of the way home without saying anything else, and that felt exactly right. I still send my parents money sometimes, smaller amounts, for actual emergencies. My dad had a scare with his back last spring, and I covered a specialist visit, no hesitation, because that's real. That's what family is for. But I don't do it out of fear anymore. I don't do it because someone is crying on the phone and I can't bear to disappoint them. I do it because I chose to, with eyes open, on my own terms. There's a difference. I know that now. I just wish someone had told me earlier that it was okay to know it. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long. Not in a self-punishing way, I'm past that, but genuinely curious. The way you get curious about a pattern once you're finally outside of it. The honest answer is that I confused love with availability. I thought being a good sister meant being the one who always picked up the phone, always said yes, always bound away. No one told me that. It wasn't something my parents sat me down and said. It was just the role that formed around me slowly. The way water shapes a rock, not all at once but one ask at a time, until the shape was so familiar neither of us noticed it anymore. What I know now is that there's a version of giving that comes from a full place, and a version that comes from fear. I was operating out of fear for years. Fear of being the one who let the family down. Fear of what it meant about me if I said no. Fear that love was conditional on my usefulness. And so I kept making myself useful, kept shrinking my own financial future, kept telling myself it was temporary, it was fine, families do this. The $14,340 wasn't just money. It was the physical proof of every time I chose their comfort over my own stability. And the thing about that kind of math is that it doesn't show up on your face or in your voice. It shows up years later, when you're 31 and living paycheck to paycheck despite a promotion, sitting at a kitchen table with a highlighter trying to figure out where your life went. Connor didn't set out to take advantage of me. I want to be clear about that because it matters. He just learned that asking worked, and I taught him that. Every time I said yes before he finished the sentence, I was teaching him that I was available without limit. The cause was small and quiet and spread over years. The effect was a number on a legal pad that made the room tilt. What changed things wasn't anger. Anger I'd had before, in small flashes, and I'd always talked myself out of it. What changed things was clarity. Looking at those bank statements and understanding, not feeling, understanding, that the pattern would not stop until I stopped it. That no one else was going to walk into that situation and fix it for me. That the only person responsible for my financial life was me. And I had been handing that responsibility away one transfer at a time. Holding that line with my family was the hardest thing I've done, and I mean that without exaggeration. Harder than the promotion I worked 18 months for. Harder than paying off the debt afterward, because with the debt there was a clear finish line. With family, you're never sure what you're walking toward. You just have to trust that being honest about what you can and cannot do is better in the long run than being endlessly available in ways that hollow you out. Amber and Connor got married. I was there. It wasn't healed, but it was honest. And honest, I've learned, is the only foundation anything real can be built on. Miles asked me once what I would tell my younger self if I could. I thought about it for a while and I said, the people who love you for what you do for them will leave when you stop. The people who love you for who you are will stay. Learn the difference before it costs you $14,340 and 4 years of your savings. I still don't know if my family fully understands what those years cost me, but I understand it. And somewhere between that kitchen table with the highlighter and the drive home from the wedding on I-70, I stopped needing them to. That was enough. It turned out that was exactly enough.